What's going on, guys? I'm Mike Berlin and you are watching Wild Fed Family. So for the last 2 to 3 weeks I've been working on a little project, and that little project is here in my hand. Now I have a bag of lunch meat, and it's not just any old lunch meat, it is venison pastrami. Now I'm gonna hit the rewind button and I'm gonna take you back to when I first started and show you how I turned a deer into meat that I can throw on some sandwiches and take to work with me. So the first thing that I gotta do is turn this into a roast that's boneless. It looks just like this. So I'm gonna show you how to break down this hindquarter, and we'll get started. So the very first thing that I gotta do is go ahead and trim this up. Now you can see the bark from where this meat was exposed while it's hanging in the cooler, and all I'm doing is running a fillet knife right up underneath it. And this is another reason why I like these Rapala 7.5-inch fillets. You can trim your meat very easily, and also, as you can see, I kind of got the tip up underneath it and got that cut started. It's lightweight, it's comfortable in your hand, and it holds a blade well. So I'm just gonna keep going around, peeling off some of the silver skin, peeling off some of the bark, and we will get it looking pretty. The next step is going to be removing the shank. Now, right here, you got your knee bone, and you can see it. There's a lump, there's your kneecap, and then there's the top of the kneecap. I come in right behind it and just kind of free it up, and you can get your blade back down in between that bone. Flip it over, and I'm gonna take this section of the eye of round and just cut a nice clean cut all the way around it, like so. Now your actual joint is going to be farther down here, so on this back side of the shank, just put some pressure on that meat and peel it back until you expose that ball joint right there, and you can see the underside of it. Here you go. This is where this fillet knife comes in handy. There's a tendon that holds all that together, and you can expose that pocket just by slipping the tip of your knife in there and follow that joint right down and around, just like that. So there's your shank. Do not waste that. I like to cook this whole, slow cook it, so we're setting that to the side. And lastly, right there is the kneecap. That's going to the dogs. So the hindquarter is trimmed, the shank is removed, but now we got to remove this femur, and it's actually a little bit easier than it takes. Just takes a little bit of time, and be careful. Now I like to get this cut started right around the top of the bone and free up all of these thicker tendons, sinews, ligaments that are holding these muscle groups to that main joint. And then you can kind of just push down on it and separate it with your fingers, and it peels away from the bone clean. Now there's actually 4 different muscle groups in this hindquarter. You got your top round, you got your bottom round, you got your sirloin tip, and you have your eye of round. Tell you what, I'm actually gonna add something to that. You have 6 different. So right there is your rump roast, and that's your tri-tip up underneath there. So separating it from the hip bone is gonna be our next step. And here's just another example of where this fillet knife comes in handy. Just get your tip in there, and this hip bone is kind of just a flat plate, and you can slide your knife right along it, sort of like following the bones on a fish's rib cage. Just kind of take your time and feel it rather than see it. And the farther you get down through it, you're gonna get a better view. Right there is another ball joint. Just roll your knife through it, and you can kind of just scrape and peel that away. So all that's left is the femur, and just like you had a bunch of ligaments and tendons holding it up here, you got the same thing at the top, and you just want to free it up a little bit. Get the tip of your knife in there, cut them around. You're doing 90% of this by feel, and the other 10%, you'll see it as you start to expose it. There you go. At this point, it's pretty much freed up. And you should be able to give that a couple twists and pull that bone right out. But we're not done yet, because there is one thing that a lot of people miss, and that is a lymph node that is in this, and I'm going to show you where to find that gland. Now, if you look down in here, this is the rump side, and this is the shank side, and you can see it right there. It's going to be encapsulated in a lump of fat, and you don't want the fat anyway, because deer fat does not taste very good, and it is pretty waxy. It's not like beef or pork fat. And there's a big vein that goes right to this lymph node. So go ahead and cut it out, and that right there is that lymph node, and there's a couple smaller ones that are embedded in that fat as well. Last but not least, you got to put this in a net. Now, I got this spool probably 3 years ago for making hams and roasts, and it has lasted me a very long time, and I got a lot left on the spool. So for 15 bucks, go ahead and get you this, because you never know when it's going to come in handy. So there you go. You got your 2 boneless hindquarter roasts ready to go. Now, I'm running out of a little bit of time. This afternoon, it is 8:15. Still gotta cook dinner. Still gotta, do my whole nightly routine. So I do not have time to put this in a brine tonight, but I'm gonna stick them in the fridge, and we'll get to that part tomorrow. So it's 2 days later, and those roasts have sat in the fridge. Right now, it's time to make a brine. So everything that you see in front of me is what you need to make the brine. Now, for 1 gallon of water, in this case I used a jug of peanut oil, recycled, as my measuring cup, and you need 1 cup of kosher salt, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, and 2 teaspoons of Prague powder #1, and that is this pink curing salt. So I have the main ingredients, salt, sugar, and the Prague powder, mixed up in a bowl, ready to go. Now, I doubled this batch, so I'm gonna make 2 gallons of brine. Now, moving on, I have some pickling spice. Now, this is pretty generic, and it gets you the kind of flavor that you want. You got coriander, you got mustard seed, bay leaves, juniper berries, clove, etc. And for this size batch, that is about 2 gallons worth. And that's going into the bowl. Now, that will give you the basic flavor that you're looking for, but I want a little bit of extra spice. So, crushed red pepper is going in, and although that pickling spice has some black pepper already in it, I'm gonna add some more just because I want a little bit of a spice to the pastrami. On to the next step. So there's everything mixed up in a bowl. I'm gonna dump it into a large pot. Go ahead and add my 1 gallon of hot water. So I'm gonna give this pot a little bit of a stir, and I'm gonna put it on the stove on medium-low heat until it starts to simmer, and all that's doing is releasing flavor into the brine. So while I got that brine going on the stove behind me, keep in mind it is a brine concentrate, so it's 2 gallons worth of seasoning for 1 gallon worth of water. So what I did while I was waiting was I put a gallon of water. This is all cold water with ice cubes in it. It's just cooling down, and I'm gonna pull it off the stove, and then we're gonna mix it together to bring it down to temp and bring it down to the right balance of seasoning to water and make a good brine. And the reason that I don't have this topped off all the way is because I'm gonna throw a couple handfuls of ice in there to help chill it down a little bit faster too. So I just went ahead and pulled my roast out of the fridge, and actually my fridge is pretty cold and they're somewhat semi-frozen. So now that this brine is, roughly room temperature, I'm gonna put these in a food grade 5-gallon bucket, and if I can, I'm gonna see if I can't kind of wedge them down there so that they stay submerged. Now all of this brine is going right over the top of them. Hold on, let me take this. It was a spammer. So there it is. You can see the 2 roast maybe submerged in the bottom. And I did 2 gallons of brine. I probably could have gotten away with 1 on this recipe, but I'd rather have enough than get to the point where I got them in there and I need more and I have to redo some stuff over again. So anyway, 2 gallons of brine is perfect for this. Now there's one more step to this. There's been plenty of times where I have brine cured meats, but that brine didn't penetrate all the way through, especially when you're using the curing salt. You want that nice red color to be consistent throughout the meat. Now, I'm gonna put this in the fridge at least 7 to 10 days, but to ensure that that brine penetrates all the way through, I got an injector right here, and all I'm doing is sticking my hand in the bucket and I'm soaking up some brine. So let me show you what I'm doing. You can see these kind of floated to the top. So here are my roasts right there. And I'm just gonna shoot these full of brine. Probably stab them about 10, 15, 20 times a piece and get right down into the middle. And just make sure they're injected really well and that brine penetrates all the way through. So they've been juiced up, and I'm gonna put these in the fridge for 10 days minimum, most likely 2 weeks. All right, so it is about 2 weeks, roughly 15 days later, and right here is that hindquarter that I've been sitting in the brine, and I'm actually gonna stop this process right here for one of these, because essentially what you have is corned venison, same thing as corned beef. So this one is getting turned into corned venison, cabbage, potatoes, onions, that sort of stuff for dinner tonight, while I have this one that's going in the smoker being turned into pastrami. So I'm headed down to the garden right now to pick a cabbage, and this is super simple. Now all I'm gonna do is get a big stainless steel Dutch oven, and I'm gonna brown that roast just with some olive oil. Once it's brown, I'm gonna throw in a little bit of mustard seeds and deglaze that with venison stock and water. Now, do not add salt because that meat contains a decent amount of salt, and it will actually provide all the salt you need for the entire pot. Now, that whole pot's going in the oven at 275 degrees, and it's gonna stay there for about 4 hours or so and braise until that meat kind of starts to fall apart. Now, I got a bunch of chores to do around the house, so it's the perfect thing to let it cook down while I'm working on something else. But later on, I'm throwing in some cabbage, potatoes, onions, carrots, and celery. I'm gonna stick it back in the oven at about 300 degrees until it is completely cooked, vegetables tender, and potatoes done. And that is dinner. But this is a pastrami video. That's bonus content. We're gonna keep making pastrami. All right, so it is time to make some pastrami, and I'm gonna start off with the seasoning. And actually I have to look at my phone. I got a list on here of what is in this bowl that I just mixed up. Now I got 3 tablespoons of coarse ground black pepper. I got a tablespoon of coriander seeds, a tablespoon of coriander powder, a tablespoon of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of paprika, 2 teaspoons garlic powder, 2 teaspoons onion powder, half a teaspoon of mustard seeds, and then half a teaspoon of mustard powder. So that is your basic rub, and no salt, because like I said, with the corned venison, you have plenty of salt. It's been brining, and that piece salted that whole pot, and we don't want a super salty pastrami. So no salt in your rub. Next, I have yellow mustard that I'm gonna rub on there as a binder, and then we're gonna rub that seasoning blend on there. Now, the next step to this is to smoke it. So I got the pellet grill running at 250 degrees, and I'm using the pellet grill just because I have a bunch of yard work to do today, and it's just very low maintenance. So we're gonna throw this pastrami on the smoker and get to working on the garden. And I'm gonna come back and pull it off when internal temp reaches 145 degrees. So the sun is setting, the pastrami has hit 145 degrees internal temp, and I'm gonna wrap it in foil and let it go to 185 degrees internal temp until it's fully cooked. So this right here is the finished pastrami. Now, yesterday afternoon, I pulled it out of the smoker at 185 degrees. It was pretty late in the afternoon, and I did not feel like clicking that camera on. And I just had a bunch of stuff to do, kids to put to bed, and dinner to cook. So this went in the fridge for 24 hours, and this is essentially a cold cut. Now, I already took that ham netting that you saw me put on off, and it is about 35 degrees, and it's ready to slice up to make some sandwiches. Now, I like to slice this stuff up super thin, and the thinner you can get it, the better. And that's one of the reasons that I only cooked it to 185 degrees, because I want it tender, but I don't want it to the point where it's falling apart and unsliceable. So this is absolutely perfect, and I just tasted it, couldn't ask for anything better. So what I'm gonna do with this one is make a sandwich, and I'm just gonna do a patty melt with some pastrami, some mozzarella cheese, and I'm gonna add a little brown mustard as a dipping sauce. And that is all you need. So, thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and I hope that you try this out on one of your hindquarters or roast or whatever it may be, because it is super delicious and you will not be disappointed. So, that's all I got for this one, and I will see you on the next video.